Hello BookTube, I'm Jonathan, and today I wanted to take a look at the evolution of dystopian books. Specifically, how modern dystopian books were influenced by the classics, and what recent trends I've noticed in the genre. A few months ago, I made a video comparing 4 dystopian classics. We by Yevgeny Zamyatin, Brave New World by Aldous Huxley, 1984 by George Orwell, and Fahrenheit 451 by Ray Bradbury. So today, I thought I'd take a look at 4 modern dystopian books. And those are The Children of Men by P.D. James, Oryx and Crake by Margaret Atwood, The Road by Cormac McCarthy, and Red Rising by Pierce Brown. This obviously isn't a comprehensive list, and a couple of these are dystopian / post-apocalyptic hybrids, but I thought these 4 books were worth discussing. So let's get started with The Children of Men by P.D. James. Humanity has become infertile, and the last babies to be born are now adults. Civilization is crumbling, and like many, Oxford historian Theodore Farron is apathetic toward a future without a future. However, a band of unlikely revolutionaries may just awaken his desire to live, and they may also hold the key to survival for the human race. The Children of Men depicts an interesting form of apocalypse. Rather than a single catastrophe, humans just stop reproducing, and humanity gradually fades away. Day-to-day life could continue somewhat as normal, but will it? The effects of this are psychological, and they take their toll on humans over an extended period of time. And this lends itself to the thematic and character-driven story that P.D. James wants to tell. It's a brilliant idea to tell this story from the perspective of a historian, one that's more concerned with learning about the past than they are fighting for a future. This book can also be interpreted as a metaphor for the experience of hopelessness or lack of purpose, and while it seems like literally there is no future for humanity in this book, it can also represent the experiences of real-life situations where people feel like they have no future. And the book examines the effect this has on your sense of self, your relationships, and your spirituality. While I thought the world building in this book was excellently done, I felt like James spent more time exploring its people. An area where this incorporates ideas from classic dystopian books is the use of an authoritarian government. It's not as overtly oppressive as the ones used in 1984 and Fahrenheit 451, but it does use fear tactics in the name of order. Society has largely accepted the situation, and in turn, it's an interesting examination of the type of people that are attracted to power, and what can happen when these kinds of opportunities are created for them. Classic science fiction has a reputation for having dry prose, but I found this to be a stunningly poetic book. Of the classic dystopian authors, P.D. James reminded me the most of Ray Bradbury. However, Bradbury's prose flows and flickers like a flame, whereas P.D. James, her writing is as sharp and isolating and unforgiving as the world she created. I think The Children of Men is an excellent example of a book that takes ideas from classic dystopian fiction and incorporates ideas from post-apocalyptic sci-fi, as well as the psychology and social sciences from new wave science fiction. Oryx and Crake by Margaret Atwood. Snowman, known as Jimmy before mankind was overwhelmed by a plague, struggles to survive in a world where he may be the last human. He embarks on a journey through the wilderness that was recently a great city, until corporations took mankind on an uncontrolled genetic engineering ride. Oryx and Crake follows 2 timelines, a dystopian future and a post-apocalyptic future. I enjoyed the dystopian chapters more as I felt like it was a richer world to explore, but I like the combination of the two and the examination of how a dystopian future can lead to an apocalypse. I would consider this also to be a character-driven story. Atwood does a great job of writing unlikable characters that are still intriguing. Something I found interesting about these characters was how they communicated to each other, as well as themselves. They lied to themselves as much as they did other people, which I found to be incredibly revealing. In several classic dystopian books, society is controlled by the information we are provided, the privacy we are denied, and the threat of violence. In Oryx and Crake, society is controlled by the extreme content we consume, the pharmaceuticals we ingest, and the genes that we modify. In this regard, I think the book was most strongly influenced by Brave New World. However, an interesting question that Atwood poses is whether these things are not so much a means with which to control society, but rather a reflection of society. It's an uncomfortable form of self-examination, a critique of the commodification of art, the trust placed in corporations, and a fascination with disaster culture. The Road by Cormac McCarthy. A father and son walk alone through burned America. Nothing moves in the ravaged landscape save the ash on the wind. It is cold enough to crack stones, and when the snow falls, it is grey. They have almost nothing, just a pistol to defend themselves, the clothes they're wearing, a cart of scavenged food, and each other. This is the most post-apocalyptic of the 4 books on this list, and what's interesting is McCarthy doesn't share the cause of the apocalypse. Whether it's a nuclear attack, a supervolcano, or a meteor strike, McCarthy creates a bleak world for the survivors. In some ways, this is a character-driven story, as we closely follow the journey of this father and son as they endure the suffering and carry the fire. And yet, in another way, these characters could be interpreted as blank slates for us to project onto. After all, they're only ever identified as the man and the boy. Perhaps it is on the reader to identify the fire in themselves. The Road is less of an examination of systems so much as it is about individual choices. When the world falls, what reason is there to choose to be a good guy? What reason is there to go on? I was also fascinated by whether goodness and light could exist within a child that has only ever known suffering and darkness, and whether concepts such as these have meaning in humanity's final hours, or whether they ever even did to begin with. In terms of the plot, this is a very simple story, but I found it to be thematically rich. It's one of the bleakest futures I've read alongside 1984, and I found it to be similarly emotionally impactful. While reading this book, I'm inclined to say there was a temporary and seasonal wave of allergies that swept through my living room. Others might say I cried. McCarthy has an interesting writing style that alternates between being rather matter-of-fact and repetitive, and much more poetic and elegant. To me, this was a wonderful representation of the simplicity and beauty of nature and life. McCarthy also takes a memorable approach to punctuation, and I'm not going to pretend to understand the reasons for all of McCarthy's choices, but I felt like the lack of punctuation really demanded my attention as a reader. Sometimes when I see quotation marks on the page, I feel inclined to speed up in order to get to the dialogue. So without any quotation marks for dialogue, The Road really forced me to slow down and focus on the little things. The Road is ambitious in its themes and scope, but ultimately for me, The Road is a book about the little things. Red Rising by Pierce Brown. Darrow is a Red, the lowest caste in the color-coded society of the future. He works all day to make the surface of Mars livable for future generations, but his kind have been betrayed. Darrow sacrifices everything to infiltrate the legendary Institute, a proving ground for the dominant Gold caste, where the next generation of humanity's overlords struggle for power. Red Rising is the most recent release on this list, and it also feels the most modern. It uses a dystopian setting, but also pulls in devices from other popular works, including a military school, a battle royale, and space opera elements. This is by far the most fast-paced and action-packed book on this list, and it has a cinematic quality to it. The rage of our main character Darrow is matched by the fury of the battle scenes. The world building is intriguing, and it has some thematic layers to it, but the driving force behind the book is the plot and the characters. The struggles for power, the formation of friendships, and the pain of betrayal are the story beats that lure you into the world of Red Rising. Red Rising uses a classic totalitarian setting, but in contrast to the book We by Yevgeny Zamyatin, where everyone is forced to be the same and individualism is lost, the citizens in Red Rising are overtly separated into classes, and that determines their access to resources and education. Red Rising is a dark and violent book, the rest of the series even more so. But there is some hope as we follow Darrow on a hero's journey. There is a better future if only Darrow is smart enough, brave enough, and can unite enough people together. So as we review where dystopian fiction is as a genre today, we can see how it is still being influenced by the classics. Modern dystopian books continue to portray the tropes of the genre, including authoritarian systems, surveillance, the control of media and information, and ruling with fear. However, we can also see how concepts have been updated to reflect modern society, new technologies, the environment, and psychology. There have also been changes in writing styles, as modern authors will craft character-driven stories, play with structure and grammar, and deliver story arcs that will resonate with modern audiences. This is just a small selection of modern dystopias. I also own copies of Wool and Station 11 that I'm looking forward to reading soon as well. So let me know some of your favorite modern dystopian books that I should add to my list. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, subscribe. It's free. And if you really enjoyed it, consider becoming a Patreon member, where you can become one of my robots, androids, or cyborgs like Nima and a New Eden. Thanks for watching, and you can find more sci-fi content over here.